Who are you? You don't know? Don't tell me Negro, that's nothing. What were you before the white man named you a Negro? And where were you? And what did you have? What was yours? What language did you speak then? What was your name? It couldn't have been Smith or Jones or Bunch or Powell. That wasn't your name. They don't have those kind of names where you and I came from. No, what was your name? And why don't you now know what your name was then? Where did it go? Where did you lose it? Who took it? And how did he take it? What tongue did you speak? How did the man take your tongue? Where is your history? How did the man wipe out your history? What did the man do to make you as dumb as you are right now?
Because however much America strays away from the ideals of justice, the goal of America is freedom. Used and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up in the destiny of America. Before the Pilgrim Fathers landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before the Pilgrim Fathers landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before the Pilgrim Fathers landed at Plymouth, we were here.
So, I'm saying all that to say that in European history, they have that. In America, they pretty much don't give you the real story at all. So you're slaves and masters. You see, it's a big difference. It makes the black Americans grow up with a built-in inferiority switch that is always in the shadows, if you really believe you come from slavery. There's a lot of questions to be had about all of that. Lots of black people don't come from a slave background but don't know it. We all believe we come from one giant slave, you dig? Or from some plantation.
I'm noticing that wonderful shirt you have on right now. It says that we are all Africans. Now, now that's easy for you to say. You were born in Kenya. So, for those of us not born in Kenya, could you please explain why we are all Africans?
I'm a fairly recently retired professor, and I'm professorial enough to draw on this convenient whiteboard here. That is 6 million years ago, and that is the common ancestor of chimpanzees and bonobos and humans. That is about 7 million years ago, and that is the common ancestor of all those and gorillas. That's about 12 million years ago, and that's the common ancestor of all those and orangutans. Orangutans, as you know, are Asian apes. Gorillas, humans, bonobos, and chimpanzees are African apes. Darwin conjectured, long before there were any available fossils, that the right place to look for human fossils was Africa. Long before there were any available fossils, that the right place to look for human fossils was Africa. And
where's all this shit happening?
You know what, brother? If you were to walk into any mosque in America and you just laid your hands on the first person or the third person or the fifth person that you see, you realize that you're laying your hands on a Native American?
I believe.
There were only 8% of the slaves that came to America. So how is it that there are so many more people that they claim are black or African American, I think they got the numbers wrong, because a lot of Native Americans are the ones that they're counting as black folks too.
Well, we're really one.
Yeah.
We're not going to let them count this is Native American, this is black. Hell no.
They manipulate our history books. The history books are not true. It's a lie. The history books are lying. You need to know that. You must know that.
That happened. Matter of fact, that was one of the things that William Byrd, who was involved in the dividing line between Virginia and North Carolina, and Alexander Spotswood, was trying to amalgamate Native people with other races to get rid of the Indians.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the Byrd papers, and you would read his diary on April the 7th, 1728, he actually visited our reservation in Jerusalem, Cortland, Virginia. And what's so interesting about that, he described how our people look. He said the young men came out and their faces were painted and they made all kinds of grotesque figures and they danced for him to the sound of a gore drum stretched tight with an animal skin. Then he said the young women came out and they were tall and shapely and dressed in their finery. Their hair was braided, and they had white and blue conch shells in their hair that hung like locks and around their neck. And then they had wrapped around their body a match coat, which was red and blue, which is a shawl, that fitted loosely about their body, that their mahogany skin shone through. Then he went. Let me get this. He went on to say that these dark angels would make exceptional wives for the English planters, and their dark skin would bleach out in 2 generations. Unquote. That's a quote that he made.
So that was the whole goal, was to try to bleach out, as they say.
Yeah, but it kind of tells you that first Americans were a rich brown people. They were mahogany in color.
The Plecker era was truly one of the darkest times for Native people in Virginia. But I think it's critical for us to think about what was the genesis of the ideology that Plecker was a proponent of. And it's really the eugenics movement. The eugenics movement was a pseudo-scientific movement. We say pseudo-scientific today because we find that the science that they were proposing is not what we today would honor as scientific in any way. The eugenics movement has a direct link to the descendants of Charles Darwin. They somehow made the leap to these notions about racial purity. What is best for each race is racial purity. Plecker and his friends convinced the Virginia legislature to adopt very restrictive legislation in 1924. It's called the Racial Integrity Act. with this legislation, it was decreed that there were only 2 possible categories. One is white, which means a person, you check that you're white if you have white ancestry, Caucasian ancestry, and absolutely nothing else. The other category is everybody else, and that's colored. So this was very hard on Virginia's indigenous community because in a sense it wipes away their identity on paper, their ability to describe themselves as Indian was not possible in the state of Virginia until 1968 when the U.S. Supreme Court forced Virginia to repeal the law.
It's much harder if you're darker, and especially with regards to DNA. The darker you are, they want more proof because they say that the original Indians that were here weren't dark skinned. Yeah, they make these felonious claims to keep us out of the loop, so they can claim that which is rightfully ours, the lands that some of us are applying for, even to this day through litigation, to reacquire some of our lands that in fact there are white people who have today all across this country that they know they are illegally occupying. So and this is what I believe ultimately is the culprit here. You know, they don't want to relinquish what was stolen. So, okay, we understand that, you know, you stole it, fine, you know, you got away with it for a few hundred years now. And you know that you've managed to divide most of us through hues and, you know, attrition and other means, arbitration, whatever. But it does leave the door open for us to fight. At every crossroad, every interval, we have to raise our voices. So the darker Indians are in a self-defense mode, if you will, that we have to defend our positions as Indians. Here I am, a light brown skin Indian. I don't have too much problem in my claims of being indigenous. Well, most people see me and say, "Oh, you look Native." I say, "Well, you know what all Native Americans look like?" Some will say, "Yeah, they look like you." I say, that's ridiculous. That's like saying like all white people look the same. Well, anyway, all Native Americans do not look alike. They vary in hue, hair texture, phenotypes. DNA is different.
Before the Pilgrim Fathers landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before the Pilgrim Fathers landed at Plymouth, we were here.